All the children of Mrs. Miller's class at Coffee Hill School were practicing for festival. That is, all the children except Carol. Carol sat to one side of the room with her legs drawn up against her body and her skirts pulled tightly around her. She had her arms around her knees and her head resting on them. She tried to look as if she was not at all interested in what was happening, but her eyes were very bright as they followed the dancers who whirled and skipped around the room. The children were dancing to the tune of Evening Time, and they planned to enter this dance for festival. Carol thought of the words of Evening Time, which was one of her favorite songs.
Evening time, work is over, now it's evening time.
As she watched, she imagined that she was whirling around the room with the others. Oh, how Carol wished she could dance, but she could not because she was different from the other children. She had been born with one leg shorter than the other, and she could not even stand straight. As tears came to her eyes, she closed them tightly so that nobody would notice how sad she was. But Mrs. Miller had noticed, and while she waited for the dancers to finish, she wondered what she could do to help Carol. Girls with baskets on their heads went across the room, turning and skipping as they tried to hold the basket steady. They were followed by boys, some with buckets and some with sticks. They were turning and bending in time to the music. Then the music stopped, and Mrs. Miller clapped her hands to get the children's attention.
Well, students, now that you have learned these steps, let us plan the rest of our performance. Besides people with heavy loads and those digging and carrying water, the song tells us about others as well. There are some playing a ring game, some breaking stones, and there is cooking being done. So, for part of the performance, some of you will dance around in a ring while others will pretend that they are breaking stones. Then, we will need somebody to sit to one side of the stage and pretend to be cooking. I have a big pot that we can put on top of some stones. That will be our make-believe fire.
Mrs. Miller said all this slowly, as if she was just thinking about it. But soon, Carol realized that she had spent some time planning it.
Now the cooking. It's an important part of the act, and I am choosing Carol to do that part. I also have another idea. Just before the end of the dance, I want all of you to join hands and dance around Carol. At the same time, you will all sing the words of the song. That will make our performance more interesting.
Then Mrs. Miller turned to Carol and added,
You have a lovely voice, Carol, so I expect you to lead the singing. In fact, I am going to let you sing some of it alone. Can you manage that? Yes, miss,
replied Carol with a little smile. She knew that Mrs. Miller was trying to make a special part for her in festival. But she still would not be dancing, and that is what Carol really wanted to do. Mrs. Miller then continued by telling them about fixing up their costumes, and just before the bell rang, she said,
Now, children, we have to practice often if we are to do well, and I know that you would like to win a prize. Anyway, this is the first time we are entering festival, and I want you to remember one thing. Even if we don't win a prize, the most important thing is for us to do our best.
When Mrs. Miller finished speaking, the children went running and skipping out to the schoolyard. School was over for the day. Carol was still in the classroom, slowly putting her books in her bag.
Is something wrong? No, miss.
whispered Carol as she held her head down and tried to pretend that she was very busy with her books.
Come and talk to me,
said Mrs. Miller, putting her arm around her.
It's just that I wish I could dance. I know it's foolish, but I wish I could dance.
Now that Mrs. Miller had spoken to her, she felt very close to tears.
Well, I wish I could dance too, but I don't do it very well because I am too fat. So instead of dancing, I teach children to dance.
Carol tried to smile because she knew that Mrs. Miller was being kind to her and trying to make her laugh. It was true that when Mrs. Miller showed them the steps for the dance, she looked very funny because she was so fat. But Carol was sure that when Mrs. Miller was younger, she was not so fat and was able to dance.
But I have never danced,
Carol said to herself. Then Carol remembered that her mother had told her not to feel sorry for herself and never to make others feel sorry for her. She held up her head and with a brave smile said,
I'll be all right, Mrs. Miller. I better hurry up now before it gets too late.
After Carol had left, Mrs. Miller sat at her table and thought for a long time. Finally, she decided on a plan, and she hoped it would work. The children practiced often, and when they were not practicing, they had to do other things to get ready. The girls were busy making their skirts and putting white lace on their blouses. They were also helping to make special shirts for the boys. Meanwhile, the boys were selling vegetables from the school garden. This was to help pay for the bus that would take them to town for the festival performance. Then, one day, a visitor came to watch them dance. He was a tall, thin man, and he was dressed in a bright red shirt and strange-looking tight black pants. The children felt nervous because nobody beside Mrs. Miller had watched them dance before. When they were finished, however, the man clapped his hands and called out,
You are doing very well, children. You must be pleased with them, Mrs. Miller.
I am, for as you know, this is the first time we have planned to enter festival. Children, this is Mr. Jones, a friend of mine from the School of Dance in town. He has come to see our dance and give us some help.
All right. I'm going to dance along with you, and we'll see what you can do. No, don't be nervous. This is one of my favorite tunes, and so I know I'm going to enjoy dancing with you.
As the music started, he joined the children, and every now and then he would call out,
Those arms are too straight. Bend the knees a little. Keep those heads steady. Pretend you are enjoying yourselves after a hard day's work. Step and skip. That's it. Lovely.
The children were surprised to see a man dance so well. Some of the boys who had felt shy about dancing felt much better now. While all this was going on, Carol sat to one side with her pot, which was placed on some stones so that it would look as if she were cooking. When the music stopped, Mr. Jones looked at Carol as if he was noticing her for the first time.
Come, little girl.
He said as he held onto her arms and helped her to her feet.
I think it would make the performance more interesting if the lady who cooks also joins in the dancing at the end. Let us try a few steps.
Oh, I can't. I can't dance. I have a bad leg.
She wished with all her heart that she could just disappear.
Don't let that stop you. I have taught quite a few people like you to dance. Don't be afraid. I will help you. I will do some very easy steps.
Carol stood as if stuck to the spot. Mrs. Miller turned on the music and the man took his first step. Then, as Carol heard the beautiful tune, she began to move. The other children were so nervous that they didn't know what to do with themselves. Some held their breath. Some grabbed each other's arms. Some shut their eyes while others hid their faces. They had known Carol for a long time and they were sure that she could not dance. They were afraid. They were sure she would fall, but Carol did not fall. Slowly she went around and around, holding on to the hands of the teacher from the dance school. Then across the room they went. Carol was dancing. Her steps were not as steady as those of the other children, and she did not skip, but she was moving in time to the music. When the music stopped, the children clapped their hands and shouted. They were proud of Carol. Then Mrs. Miller smiled and said,
"Well, Carol, you have danced, and you will dance in festival with us."
Carol was so amazed at what had happened that she could hardly speak.
"Yes, miss,"
she said quietly, but her eyes were bright and happy.
As you practice, you will become better.
"Yes, thank you very much for helping me."
When Carol told her parents that evening, they could hardly believe it, but they were happy for her. To their surprise, Carol did not look as happy as they expected. "What is it, Carol? You wanted to dance, and now you have a chance to try."
But I will be nervous. Even if I practice, I will never dance as well as the others. And I have to sing part of the song alone.
Well, Carol, from what you tells us, you will not be doing as many different steps as the other children. So nobody will notice that you are perhaps not quite as good. And I tell you that all the children will be nervous about going on a big stage in front of a lot of people. Most people are nervous when they do things for the very first time. We know that you can sing well. You sing at church all the time, don't you?
Yes, I suppose I can do it.
As the time for festival drew closer, the children practiced every day, for they wanted to win a prize. Then, it was the day of their performance. The children in Carol's class had breakfast early and met at school. They were so excited that they almost fell over each other as they rushed into the bus that was taking them to Kingston. Some were fighting to sit by windows. Others were trying to find space to put bags with shirts, blouses, and the rest of their clothes. Finally, Mrs. Miller made them sit quietly while she made sure that all the children were there and that they all had their costumes. At last, they started off. Behind them traveled another bus with those of their families who were able to go to see the festival show. The buses drove steadily over the hillside roads. Often, there were high mountains on one side while the land dropped sharply away on the other. Sometimes, the children could look down and see rivers rushing over rocks and then disappearing between the trees. After a while, they left the forested mountains behind and were driving along straight roads. There were buildings everywhere. It had also become very hot. Finally, the bus slowed down in a place where everything seemed to be happening at once. There were cars, trucks, and vans blowing their horns and fighting each other for space on the road. Along the roadside were people selling shirts and blouses, lace and buttons, as well as many other things. Hundreds of people crowded the sidewalks or tried to squeeze between cars and trucks on the road. Then, at last, they stopped at one of the big buildings. There were many school children in front of it. Mrs. Miller said that this was the theater where the festival contest would be held. The children of Coffee Hill School had been sitting for so long that they could hardly straighten their knees. But soon, they were jumping out of the bus and rushing into the theater. Then, they went straight to their places as it was almost time for the show to begin. There were other performances before the Coffee Hill School dance. Some children did a dance to the tune of a digging song. Then there was an African dance done to the beating of drums. This was a great favorite with the crowd. After that, there was a jump on a group which the children found very exciting. At last, it was Coffee Hill's turn. The girls' bright red skirts and white lace blouses made a lovely picture next to the boys' black pants and bright blue shirts. The children did their steps beautifully, just as the teacher from the dance school had shown them. Carol sat to one side with her pot on the make-believe fire. When it was time for her to join the dancers, she held hands with one of the other children and danced across the stage. The children knew that she would not fall, and nobody watching even noticed that her steps were not quite as steady as those of the other children. Then, for the final part of the performance, the children sang while they danced, and after that, Carol stepped forward on the stage and sang the words of the song alone.
Evening time, work is over now, it's evening time.
Her voice was sweet and clear as it filled the theater. As the dance finished, Carol's voice softly ended with,
Feel the evening breeze.
Suddenly, there was a great noise as people clapped their hands and shouted. Others got to their feet and called out, "Yay! Yay!" As Carol stood with the other children on the stage, she could see her parents sitting in the front. They were smiling and they looked very proud. Carol even thought that she could see tears in her mother's eyes. It took her a little while to realize that the people were not only clapping the dancing, she could hear people calling out,
What a beautiful voice!
"What a sweet girl!"
What a way she can sing.
Carol could not believe it. They were talking about her. There were other dances after that, and then it was time for the prizes. The children sat with Mrs. Miller and waited with excitement. They wondered if they had won a prize. A fat man with a little beard went up on the stage and began to speak.
Well, today we have seen a wonderful show. I know you all have your favorites, but only one group will get the gold medal. And that goes to Happy Mountain School, who did the Junkunut. We have given them the medal because they not only danced well, but in choosing to do a Junkunut dance, they have shown us an interesting Jamaican custom. We think that it is very, very important for our children to remember their customs. Their costumes were also good. I am sure that you all can agree.
Everybody clapped, and the children from Coffee Hill School clapped as well. They knew that Happy Mountain School had done well.
Now children, teachers and parents, when I said we have seen a wonderful show, I did not mean only the gold medal winner. All the schools were good, and we had a hard time choosing the winners. In fact, we were so pleased with the performance of another school that we have decided to give a special prize this year. It goes to Coffee Hill School, who are entering the contest for the very first time. Their dance was all the more interesting because of the idea of the children singing for part of the time. This is not a song contest, but we wish to say that the young lady who was chosen to sing by herself touched our hearts. She has a beautiful voice. Will that little lady come and get the prize for her school?
As people clapped and shouted, Mrs. Miller held on to Carol's arm and said,
That's you he's talking about, Carol. Go up on the stage. I can't. I don't walk well. What are you saying, child? Don't be shy. Nobody minds how you walk. You can walk and you can dance. And what is more, you can sing.
Carol thought she was in a dream as she went up for the special prize. The children of Coffee Hill School jumped to their feet and shouted, "Yay, Carol! Yay, Coffee Hill!" There were other medals, But Carol hardly noticed what was happening. She could not even remember traveling back home. It was all still like a lovely dream. She wondered if she would wake up next morning and find that it had not really happened. But in the morning, when she saw her parents' happy faces, she knew it was true. When Carol got to school, everybody called out to her. She felt as if she were famous.
Carol, how do you feel today? I'm not sure, miss. I still can't believe that it is true, but I want to thank you for all your help. I am very happy that I was able to help because something wonderful happened, and I don't really mean your dancing. True enough, you found that you could dance, and that is nice because you wanted to do it so much. But just think of it, Carol. All this time you were longing to dance, you had forgotten about your voice. You see, Carol, whether we have a problem like yours or any other kind of problem, all of us have special things that we do best. We all can learn something from these children. Don't you think it would be a good thing if we tried not to worry too much about the things we can't do? Then we would have more time to spend on the things we do well. The greatest prize is to find out what we do best and do it. By the way, I have a surprise. Carol's parents told me that they may be moving to Kingston soon, as our father is going to work there.
Aww.
Yes, I know. We will be sorry to see Carol go, but yesterday there was a lady at the contest from the School of Music. She said that Carol should come for classes at the School of Music because she has a beautiful voice. Just imagine, children, perhaps one day we will have a great Jamaican singer who came from Coffee Hill School.
Yes for Carol! Yay for Coffee Hill! Carol knew then that she had really found the best prize of all.